Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to check in very quickly. So, Paul Ambos, are you here for just Constitution and Canons or resolutions also?
Both of those.
Okie doke. And do you need any screen sharing to happen, or are you ready for that?
I suppose I can be ready for that.
Okie doke. Well, I see we've got Steve with us too, so maybe Steve can help us be ready with that too if you need any help. So those reports actually are on the convention, in the convention reports, Steve. So if you want to maybe pull those up and just have them ready, I think that would probably be helpful when Paul goes through his portion. So
I can do that for on-screen sharing.
yes. Let me just make sure. You should be fine. Yeah, you're the host, so you should be fine for that. Good. Alrighty. So today we celebrate the lives of Cyril and Methodius. Cyril was a monk, Methodius a bishop. Both were missionaries to the Slavs, and I'd like to start us off today with the collect for their celebration today. So let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, by the power of the Holy Spirit, you moved your servant Cyril and his brother Methodius to bring the light of the gospel to a hostile and divided people. Overcome all bitterness and strife among us by the love of Christ, and make us one united family under the banner of the Prince of Peace, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us today and to get up to speed on matters of importance for our upcoming convention. I am Canon Phyllis Jones, and I am here on behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee. Our treasurer, Jonathan Gloucester, had a conflict for today and wasn't able to join us, so I'm standing in for him. And we are blessed to have our Chancellor, Canon Paul Ambos, here with us to go over the resolutions and canonical changes that will be before us at this year's convention. So I am going to go ahead and lead off with the budget conversation, and then Paul will follow me with the canons and the resolutions. So having so said, I will share my screen with you and we can get started. So here we have side by side for your reference our 2021 approved budget and the amounts of our actual expenditures for 2021 and the variance against the budget for all of our line items. And then over here we have the 2022 proposed budget and the 2023 preliminary budget. Annette, in response to your question, this document is not yet available on the website. We normally wait until after our pre-convention hearings are complete to post this one, because from time to time there have been things that have come up in the pre-convention hearings that have led to consideration of changes before the final amount is decided upon for convention. So those are very rare, but that's the reason why this is not yet posted on the website. The resolutions and the canonical changes are already posted as reports on the diocesan website. So saying, I'll go ahead and move on through. Did that answer your question okay, Annette? Okay, great. And I will, I'm going to actually encourage all of you to do exactly what Annette did there with the questions. If you do have questions feel free to post them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead on through what we have here, at least for the 2022 proposed budget, before stopping. And so if you're afraid you won't remember your question until I stop, then please do feel free to go post it in the chat. But once I do stop, there will be time for question and answer before I move on. So I'm going to start actually with our with the 2022 proposed budget, and I'm going to actually move through the expense part of that first, which is over here in this in this column right here, and then the 2023 budget is over on the far right. We'll get to that after we get through the 2022. So as we move through our diocesan priorities, we can see that in our mission congregation line item here for 2022, we are showing a budget of $526,750, which is just a little bit over $100,000 more than was budgeted last year. This is a reflection of the fact that we have an increasing number of missions who are asking for assistance, and really an ongoing evaluation process by our Board of Missions, which does an amazing job of every year receiving the applications that come in from our mission churches, evaluating them, and then making recommendations. They had right in the neighborhood of, I believe, about $600,000 worth of applications this year. And from those, they had to make some tough decisions about which ones were to be accepted in what amounts. And so, again, that represents just a little bit over $100,000 of increase over our prior year budget. Also, this is line item number 20 is our commitment to the Episcopal Church, which actually went down a little bit from 2021, which is over here, due to just a small decrease in our overall diocesan budget, which is the number on which this is based. For most of our other items in here, we're not seeing any other market increases. We do have a bit of an increase in our anti-racism budget to reflect the fact that they are really anticipating being able to do, hopefully, even more in-person activity in 2022, returning to doing some in-person activity rather than having everything be done virtually. And so making provision in the budget for that. And then, as I mentioned, most of the rest of this is pretty much on a par with where it was last year. So overall, in our diocesan priority segment, we have just over, or just under actually, $100,000 net increase, most of which is due from the mission congregations increment, which I talked about before. And then moving down into our congregational development section, we have the biggest difference here, obviously, is that we no longer have a parish COVID-19 response line item that we had before. That actually was a little bit of a holdover in 2021 from some of our PPP funding that we had in 2020, which is now all exhausted. So there's nothing left in there, which means that the amount for our congregational development section is about a little over $20,000 less than it was budgeted the year before. Getting into our ministry development area, we have a increase, smaller, relatively small, in 2022 increase from the Committee on the Priesthood, again reflecting, thankfully, some increased activity that they're having in people entering into the process and all of the amounts that are associated with that ministry. And then having increasingly implemented school for ministry. There's a $16,000 jump on this particular line item that again reflects some really vital and vibrant work going on within the school for ministry, which now has 3 separate tracks, one for lay leaders, one for deacons, and one for priests. and is offering a wide variety of offerings for people who, in an online setting. This is all being done virtually. And, for people who might be interested in anything from lay enrichment to pursuing a track towards ordination as a deacon, or even reading for orders as a priest. So again, there's a lot of activity going on within the School for Ministry, which is really wonderful to see happening. And those two items accounted for the about $38,000 increase that is showing in our ministry development segment of the budget. Diocesan Ministries, in the youth and young adults, we are again anticipating a return to the ability to be able to do more in-person ministry, and our missioners for youth are reinstating some of the programs that had to be suspended, especially some of the granting programs that had to be suspended pre-COVID. And looking forward to more activity and being able to gather together with our youth as the year goes on. We also have General Convention going on this year, where we're hoping to have a youth presence, and so that could be a part of this too. And then we have in our community initiatives, we have our Reparations Commission with a $50,000 budget line item, again, as they anticipate being able to continue and build on all of the wonderful work that they did in 2021 to continue to research and educate as we move towards what you'll also see in one of our resolutions is, to continue have ongoing the work of the Reparations Commission. So looking forward to seeing more of the workshops and educational things that will be coming from our Reparations Commission, and then continuing our amount of social justice block grants. Within the diocese, our gatherings, our diocesan convention, still keeping, understanding in 2022 that we will be having a fully virtual convention, keeping it at basically the same level that our 2021 was. But then anticipating hopefully in 2023 that we will be doing at least a hybrid version. So we'll have some in-person participation as well as online. Our clergy conference and lay leader conferences staying pretty much the same. Lambeth is an amount that we accrue every year, Lambeth being held once every 10 years, and anticipating that the cost of that would be about $10,000. We just accrue $1,000 a year so that we don't get hit all in one year with that as a budget line item when it happens. The House of Bishops had been up until recently, and I'm not sure, quite honestly, if they still are or not, anticipating they had been having their meetings virtually through the COVID time period, but we anticipated in the budget that they very well may go back to having them in person. So we fully funded that line item. And then General Convention, these amounts were proposed in conjunction with recommendations from the General Convention deputation itself, to be able to add to amounts that we have already accrued, so that we'll be able to pay the amounts associated with General Convention in this year, because General Convention is happening this year. And then also to anticipate that in another, 2 years really after this General Convention, normally it's every 3 years, but now in 2 years after this General Convention will be the next General Convention. So not only are we paying the amounts that we anticipate for this year's General Convention, we're also beginning to anticipate the 2024 General Convention in this line item for 2022. Moving into programs and covenants, we have, pretty much the only difference here is, again, the return to normal operating levels, what we would call normal operating levels. Who knows what normal is anymore, for our companion diocese committee. So we do have a bit of an increase there. And then we had a request, again, based on some of our experiences and learnings from being through this COVID time period, for a new line item for the Episcopal Mental and Spiritual Health Crisis Ministry. So that is a new line item for this year. And the total of those two together bring us to about $12,000 more than in 2021. And then the one area where we have a number of significant changes, really based on our looking towards being able to align our staffing more closely with the needs of the Diocese of New Jersey, as we've had some developments that have been happening over the past year, that we have made some significant changes to the diocesan staff line items. The one largest change has to do with the Canon to the Ordinaries position. And as many of you may know, but many of you may not, Canon Brian Jemmett, who had been serving us in that position, had been on medical leave of absence towards the end of last year, or through a portion of last year. And towards the end of last year, in conversation with Brian and his doctors were not recommending a return to work for him. He had been in Georgia with his family, and again, it was not recommended for him to return to work. So we did negotiate an agreement with him that will allow him to continue to be compensated through September of this year. After which point, the Canon to the Ordinary position, as it has been in the Diocese of New Jersey, will not exist at least for 2023. Obviously, we realize, with the Episcopal transition that we're in, that, an incoming bishop may choose to change that when they come in. But for now, that position will not be budgeted for 2023 as the Canon to the Ordinaries position. We are looking to instead separate the position of Chief Operating Officer from Chief Financial Officer, and then also to provide as a separate position for a transition ministry officer, which was a part of what the Canon to the Ordinaries position had under its responsibilities previously. Those position changes you'll see here reflected in the budget as I go along. And so the bishop's position remained the same. I should also add that in the middle of everything that we'll be talking about here, we did in this budget anticipate a 4.5% cost of living adjustment for most of the staff, substantially all of the staff, in accordance with what was recommended by our Standing Committee on Clerical Compensation as the cost of living adjustment for all of the clergy across the diocese. So that is also incorporated here. However, Bishop Stokes specifically requested that his compensation remain unchanged. And so that amount has been reflected here in the budget, so that it remained unchanged. And so, as I mentioned, we have our compensation, the 9 months worth of the compensation for the Canon to the Ordinary in 2022, and then that stops in 2023. And then we have the Chief Operating Officer's position that is, again, with just the standard cost of living adjustment. And then a Chief Financial Officer, we're budgeting for 6 months in 2022, and then the full year in 2023. And then a Canon for Transition Ministry, again, for 6 months, in 2022 and a full year in 2023. And then there was also an increase that was budgeted for our Canon for Hispanic Ministry, really to reflect the increase in the duties that he's had with the growing amount of activity that we have in the Diocese of New Jersey, and to bring him up on a par salary-wise with the other some of the other canonical positions or canon positions within our diocesan staff. And then the rest of our budget here is based on the 4.5% increase, the cost of living adjustments for all of the other staff positions who are here. That pretty much takes us down to the bottom of this section, where we see that the totals for diocesan staff under these new arrangements are just over $2 million, where they had been 1.8, just over 1.8 in 2021. So that does incorporate a $200,000 increase in that particular area. And then moving down into our diocesan obligations, we've got our search committee, the Episcopal election and transition. Obviously, this is new for this year and for 2023. We've got $55,000 per year per committee, again, to space out evenly across the 2 years the costs that we will have associated with the Episcopal election and transition. Not that the timing of these costs is going to work out nice and neat and even that way, but in order to spread the cost evenly, this is how we've broken it down across the 2 years. And then in most of the areas that we have under the finance and the facilities, we do continue to have some facilities line items that continue to continue to show a decrease in the budget amount for, because we're not using diocesan house anywhere near as much as we used to. And many of the others have just, pretty much stayed at the same levels that they were in prior years. And then last but not least, as we get down into our general obligations, we've got the biggest change that we see here in the retired clergy health insurance and the widows and orphans health insurance. We were really blessed this year in that Church Pension Group made a significant change in how they handle health insurance for retired clergy. They went from the existing menu of options that they had to a different type of a program where they still provide, the same levels of insurance for our clergy, but because of the way that they purchase the insurance, they were able to do so at a much lesser cost. And now Church Pension Group is funding a lot of the cost, is funding almost all of the cost for the retired clergy that the Diocese of New Jersey used to be covering under our program for the. This all has to do with the Medicare supplements that the retired clergy get. And so they used to have different levels. They had a basic level, which CPG has always funded. And then they had a plus level and a premium level. And the diocesan policy from the time that I started here had always been that we provided the premium coverage for our clergy. And we subsidized that from a diocesan level based upon their years of service in the Diocese of New Jersey. So 5 to 10 years of service, we would subsidize 25%, 10 to 15 years, we would subsidize 50%, 15 to 20 years, we would subsidize 75%. And if there was over 20 years, we would subsidize 100% of that. Well, now CPG has pretty much absorbed almost all of the cost of that insurance for our retired clergy, so that it's no longer necessary for us to provide those subsidies, which means that, as you can see here, we've had close to a $300,000 drop in the amount of insurance cost that was necessary to be carried in the diocesan budget. And so that's, again, obviously the source of the drop in our diocesan obligations, the big drop that's there, which means that for 2022, we have an overall budget of $4.3 million, as opposed to just over $4.1 million, so almost $200,000 more than we had in 2021. And with that, I am just going to go back up to the revenue section briefly, run through that for you. One of the really real good news stories that we have moving forward is that we are really holding steady with our diocesan, with the congregational contributions to our diocesan budget. The amounts that people are pledging are staying, as you can see, year on year, very consistent. And we've had, some real bright spots in the way that we're heading with our, with, yes, the pledging, but also the engagement of our congregations in our life as a diocesan community. We now have, I believe, I have to look, I can't believe I forgot this number, but I believe that it's 64 of our congregations who are pledging at the full asking. When I started here 12 years ago, that number was about 35. And we have many more of our congregations who are at least tithing tithing on their budgets, and our realization rate. What we call the rate at comparing the rate at which people are pledging to the total amount that was asked. Our realization rate right now is about 78.2%. Again, when I first started, it was down in the low 60s. And so that really, is a cause for rejoicing, not just because it's helped us to maintain a certain level of pledge income, but, just for the level of engagement that it shows, and the communication and the relationship building, I believe, that are going on, between all of us, understanding that we are diocesan community together, but especially, from diocesan administration to the congregations and back. I think, that, it really speaks to me of an increased level of engagement and relationship that we have with each other. And I'm grateful for that. I really am. And then as we move on down here, these next two line items are amounts that are normally available through dividends from our trust funds, followed by an amount of available surplus that we anticipate having from 2021. And then down into lines 6A, and 6D are amounts that we anticipate needing from our trust funds over and above the dividends that they pay off. These three line items, we had been being very successful in getting them to decline slowly, but decline year on year for a while. And that is going to be changing in 2022. Obviously, we've got the $110,000 here in 2022 and 2023 that we are going to require for our Episcopal search and transition, which are new to our budget and, very discreet. And then the Hispanic missioner support amount of the budget in increased, as we talked about before, commensurate with the expense line item. And then we also are, and we increased or requested of our trustees to increase the amount for just general ministry support, which again has to do with increases in things like the amounts that we're using to fund our mission congregations and some of the other operational changes that we've had. And including, the realignment of some of our staff positions. So that is basically my overview. And with that, I will go ahead and take a look into the chat to see what kinds of questions, observations we have here. So yes, thank you, Steve, for posting all of those links up there. And so I see Annette's question: is there a thought in the future of having a paid canon for youth ministry? Yes, I think, Annette, that's always on our minds. Right now, we do have 2 people who are working as, on a paid basis as youth missioners, Claire Gutwine and Joe Rodriguez. They are stipendiary right now. And the total of their stipends together is about $30,000. And so, we are, we always are thinking about, what might work best within that position, and are looking actually to Joe and Claire and some of the people that we are working with also, who are supporting them in lifelong Christian formation, to really be looking at what we need to do on that level. So yes, that is definitely in our thoughts.
May I make a comment, Canon?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I know that it's a huge decision we made a few years ago, but all of our congregations are extremely concerned about the status of, this youth programming initiatives. I'm sure you're on board with the fact that the youth is not the future, but it's the current. And this is not any disparaging at all to the 2 people who I know well who are working hard. But I think as a diocese, especially our size, that we really need someone committed to youth and young adult ministry, for the future of our diocese. So I just wanted to ensure that, in our deliberations, that's a priority for us.
Great, thank you so much. And what I will be doing is making a note of all this so that when we begin in late summer, early fall, with our deliberations at the finance and budget level, that we make sure that we include what we've gained, from these conversations in our planning process. So I do appreciate you raising that. Thank you. And then Allison, I see that you had made the statement, I cannot support a budget without clergy representation. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. Canon to the ordinary position, I think, is important to the diocese, and I understand that we're in a transitional period. However, I just see this budget reflecting that we undervalue our clergy, that our clergy is not going represented by our staff of the diocese. And by not representing our clergy and the importance thereof, it neglects our congregations. So I am very unsettled with the fact that we won't have a canon to the ordinary, and that there will be essentially, with assuming Rob moves on to bishop, essentially no clergy representation in the diocese.
Well, and again, I do, very much hold Rob in prayer for his, for his path moving forward. And I hope that, the Diocese of Utah would be blessed to have him as a bishop. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't fill his position if he leaves. So that part would still be there. And I think, what we're looking at here, which I think also sort of covers Annette's question coming up next, is that a part of what we're trying to do here is deal with a lot of transition, a lot of staff transition at the same time we have an Episcopal transition. And that's not an ideal time, as I think we all know, to be dealing with staff transition, because the next bishop who comes in may have their own ideas, will have their own ideas about how they want to structure things. So I think that, two things I would say there. First of all, to perhaps allay some of the misgivings or fears that you may have, Allison, I would definitely suggest that you talk directly with Bishop Stokes, because this was something that he was very strong about, that he really wants to, this was a direction that he really strongly wanted to go. So to find out, directly from him what his mind is there might be helpful, but then also to remember that, what happens moving forward is very much going to be in our next bishop's hands as well. Okay.
I clearly will make my feelings known to the bishop.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so, yeah, I see Art, in the event there is an opening for the Canon for Congregational Development, will that vacancy be filled? Yes, it will definitely be filled. I wouldn't see any reason why it wouldn't be. Again, sort of given this transitional period that we're in, I don't know how quickly it would be filled. A lot of this does have to do with, Bishop Stokes' feelings about how much of the staff transition he wants to deal with before giving the opportunity for a new bishop to be able to have a say. But let's just say, from my standpoint anyway, that staff position has been and will continue to be budgeted for. And then I would leave it to him to decide how he feels about when he wants to fill it. And yes, it is messy for an incoming bishop. I totally agree. We've been, walking this journey. It's messy no matter how you look at it. It's messy if we try to do something about it. It's messy if we don't try to do something about it. And so what we've tried to do, again, is to do the best we can based on the, what we see in front of us. Having been here and having experienced what we've experienced, to try to put things in the best framework we can for someone coming in. That really is, quite honestly, our intent in framing things the way that we have. We are not perfect. Nobody is perfect. And it could be that someone coming in will decide to do things quite differently. And we all, have to be prepared for that, even at the diocesan staff level. So I do agree with you. It is messy no matter what way you slice it. I see Jack's comment. I'd be interested to knowing what other dioceses use the COO CFO model. Also, if Brian is medically unable to fulfill his position, shouldn't he be medically retired? Why pay what amounts to a severance when we are not terminating him? Some of the parts of that conversation, Jack, I really can't answer. I would be, breaching all kinds of levels of confidentiality if I did. But if you'd like to have that conversation, especially the part about other dioceses using the COO CFO model, offline, because again, I know there are some. I don't know specifically which ones they are at the moment. I'd be able to have, be happy to have that conversation offline. Paul Ambos was asking, do the changes in the medical insurance for retired clergy, assuming they continue into the future, require an amendment to Canon 36? My understanding is that they will. I believe that Pat Hawkins actually is the one who's working on that. The details of those changes did not actually become, as far as I understand it, fully approved by CPG until, very late last year. So my understanding is that she is working on that so that we can change our canons accordingly. Because yes, we, well, I was just kind of starting to think into some detail that I probably shouldn't go into at the moment, but I will just say yes, and we'll talk more about that. And Paul DeSarno agrees, yes. Susan observed, this isn't a major expense, but I see that we overspent in diocesan communications last year by almost 10,000, but we've reduced the budget for next year by 6,000. I'm wondering if there's a reason why we would expect this expense to decrease. And so what we did is, the reason that we overspent communications last year was because we completely revamped the website. And so what we did was actually returned the budget to a level prior to, at the same level that we had prior to any work being anticipated on the website at all. And, so that's the basically the reasoning behind that one. So I see Donna was referring to one of the points that Annette made. Annette had also asked, was there any consideration to increasing the compensation of the Canon for Black ministry? It's currently $19,000. That was something that that we did not specifically consider as changing for 2022 or 2023. We are, I know, in the process of evaluating the whole position in which Clive currently finds himself. And so thinking about if we would be able to do something with that particular position. But beyond, that sort of general, what do I say, that sort of general conversation, there was not specific consideration given to that in the future, or for 2022 or 2023. Which is not to say that there couldn't be. Greg said, apart from clergy transitions, I wonder how clergy have experienced the ministry of the canon to the ordinary. I don't mean a particular incumbent, but this position in general. And again, I would encourage, all of you who have issues about, or, questions about the change being proposed, to the canon to the ordinary, to definitely make yourselves heard, to Bishop Stokes, so that you can again, see what thoughts he had behind his recommendation that happen, and then perhaps build, towards, what we'll be looking at in the coming budget cycle. So, again, we will our next budget cycle will happen beginning late summer, early fall of this year. And so if there are recommendations that need to be made in order to, have those be heard during that budget cycle, now actually would be a good time to get started, talking about those, so that we're not waiting right until the very last minute. So, and then Wendy, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm concerned also, like the Reverend, I guess it was Tricia Thorne, about the canon to the ordinary position.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also concerned about Commissioner for Black Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Canon Clive Sign has been working extremely hard, doing many, many jobs. He can't do it all. And in the meantime, our Black churches are suffering. We have quite a few churches right now who do not have a rector. And I don't think that's right. I really don't think that's right. We either have to get a missioner or relieve Canon Clive Sign of some of his duties so that he can work diligently with the historically Black congregation. I really think that's wrong. Just saying.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely hear that. And as I mentioned, that topic of conversation, understanding right now, you know, the burdens that Clive has, and trying to work through that into a better situation are definitely things that that we have had conversation about and will continue to. So thank you. I appreciate that. Annette.
Yes, Canon Phyllis, you said a number of times that we should engage the bishop with regard to his thoughts about canon to the ordinary. What forum would you suggest? Because these pre-convention hearings are basically budget and resolutions, and at the end of them we're at the March convention. So, what will be the best way for us to convey collectively our questions, our concerns, such that they get reflected in the budget conversations?
Well, I guess, just based even on what I'm hearing now, because this is our first pre-convention hearing. So, based on the level of concern that I'm hearing now, I think what I would do is, first take this back to him just to let him know of the level of concern that's being expressed, and see if, perhaps it would be a good idea for us to, convene maybe a special meeting for people who are concerned, to be able to have as you say, like one forum where people could express the concerns that they have. In the meantime, again, what I would really recommend is that you go ahead and email him and just let him know, that hey, I just got off the pre-convention hearing. I understand, that there's some major changes being proposed, including the elimination, at least temporarily, of the canon to the ordinary position. And I have some real concerns about that. And then he'll also have that in his own inbox. And, he can make some decisions from there as to how he thinks it might be best addressed. Are there any other questions? Well, again, thank you all very much for your attention and your engagement and your honesty in expressing your concerns. We really do appreciate it. And with that, I will hand it over to Canon Paul Ambos to take resolutions or constitution and canons, whichever he feels should come first.
Thank you, Phyllis. Well, if you look at the documents on the link that Steve had sent earlier in the chat, the first document in order is document number 3, which is the report of the Standing Committee on Constitution and Canons for this year. The committee, as you may know, is a committee of 5 people. It's a combination of clergy and laity, and the lay members are encouraged to have some expertise in law or canon law. And so we as a group basically receive requests which get sent to us by December 1st of every year, hopefully, so that we can then look at them, sort of put them into canonical language, make a recommendation as to possible changes, and then put it forward to convention for adoption for any changes to the Constitution or canons that seem to be called for. So if we can share the screen for document number 3, Steve.
There you go.
It might make it easier for people to see. But so the report of the Constitution and Canons Committee is divided into parts, and the first part, and they sort of run along through the Constitution and Canons, is a proposed amendment to the Constitution of the Diocese. And this deals with the election of deputies to the General Convention. Many officers of any kind of organization typically will take, their term begins at the close of the convention that they get elected at. And the deputies of the General Convention have that built into the current canonical constitutional provision in Article 10, Section 1, which is, you can see at the bottom of that page, you can see what the text is. Basically, it says people are elected until their successors are elected and qualified, or and language like that. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work very well for deputies and alternates to the General Convention, because they are, excuse me, was changed, I think about 10 or 15 years ago, so that we try to elect the deputies earlier in the triennial cycle for the General Convention rather than later. And so that in the year that typically the convention will be held, we then go ahead and elect one's deputies for the next convention. And this last convention has been adjourned for a year because of the COVID pandemic. And so the cycle is a little bit off. But even generally, what has happened in the practice is that deputies to the General Convention will go to the General Convention, and then they will stay as a deputation and prepare a report to the Diocesan Convention for the following year as to what happened at the General Convention. And so this is a proposal to amend the Constitution to really basically say you hold office until the close of the Diocesan Convention following the General Convention for which they were elected, which is sort of what the practice has been. It's become rather obvious for this Diocesan Convention, because we're electing deputies for the 81st General Convention, which is taking place in 2 years rather than 3 years because of the shift in the 2021 convention to 2022. So this is a proposal that has been made, and the next page at the top, it has similar kind of thing for the alternate deputies. Assuming that this is passed at this convention, in order to amend the Constitution, we have to have the same language be enacted by successive diocesan conventions, and the second time around has to be done by a vote by orders. So theoretically, this would not really take place in the language until it's approved at next year's diocesan convention, which hasn't happened yet. But this is the premise upon which we're going, and it's continuing the past practices of the deputations. Part 2, unless there's any questions on that, I'm not following the chat, so I don't know if there's anybody. I don't see anything. So that's it for part 1. Part 2, as you all know, we are in the process of electing a new bishop, and the first thing that happens in all of that process are the special congregational elections and the special convocational elections to choose the members of the committee for the election. And having experienced that over this last year, we've had people, primarily the deans of the convocations, who have communicated with the committee and other interested people. And so we need to tweak some of the things. And so if you look at the language on the bottom, so I guess on page 3, there's a typo correction about a third of the way down. Yeah, keep going. That's page 3. Okay, there's a reference to section 2. That should be section 4, which is fixing that. We knew about that in there. Changing insure to ensure, which is a vocabulary thing. But the major changes are coming at the bottom of that page, where we add a provision for giving full contact information for people elected by congregations, and also adding a sentence saying that the ecclesiastical authority, which is either the bishop or the standing committee if there's no bishop in office, shall make provisions for registering the people at the special meetings of the convocations and getting nominations done. This is, again, another procedure that became rather evident when all of these meetings were held virtually. And so we had to have things arranged to beforehand, similar to what we do for the diocesan convention in terms of things like nominations from the floor. And so this has been proposed to be put into the canon to, sort of ease that whole process along. And again, there was a question that came up as to what members of the clergy should be able to vote in these special convocational meetings. The current language is that if they exercise their ministry within the convocation or they reside in the convocation. That is different from any other kind of convocational meetings, which only is the clergy who vote there are the ones who exercise their ministry. And so this change is made to conform to that. And again, using full contact information rather than names, address, and telephone numbers, because people communicate by email as well as telephone these days. And that's basically it for part 2. Moving ahead to part 3, the trustees of diocesan trust funds have requested a change in their canon. The current language is that once you serve a full term, you cannot run again. You go scroll down a little bit further, and you can see implementing the resolution 3, and those language changes. And they ask that we expand that so that an elected member can serve 2 terms before they become ineligible for election. And then after a year, they can run again. And the committee, again, with these and the 2 prior parts, the Committee on Constitution Canons agrees, and we recommend that they be adopted. For part 4, this relates to the membership of the Board of Missions, and you can see the language changes on the scroll down a little bit more about another paragraph on top 5. We have a situation that has arisen, I think, in the Northern Convocation where at the present time there are no mission congregations. All the missions have become parishes or otherwise merged into them or closed, and so we had to add language at the request of the deans of the convocation so that if there is no mission church, or if they can't find somebody from mission church willing to serve, then members of the committee can be elected by the convocations from any church in the convocation, which is just a practicality to make sure that that works and that we can get members to serve on the Board of Missions. Moving ahead. I have somebody pointing out, Art Lovedell telling there's an error, but I'm not sure where the error is. Can we unmute Art to explain that?
He should be able to unmute himself.
Yeah, he did also add in the chat, he says that there are 2 or more missions in Northern Convocation.
I thought there were. Somebody said that there weren't, but there was. It was perhaps a different convocation that had run out of missions. You think that since we have so many missions in the diocese that there should be enough. But also, deans had said that they had problems getting candidates to run for the Board of Missions, even from those mission congregations, which by definition tend to be smaller. So they have fewer people available to run. So Art doesn't have a microphone on his computer. Thank you for that observation, Art. Part 5 relates to the Standing Commission on Clerical Compensation. As you can see from their report, which is also posted on the website at this point, there was some duties that were being expanded requested to be expanded for the Commission on Clerical Compensation. And you can see one of the ones here, to have exceptions to the minimum compensation for clergy. You'll see a couple of other changes that will show up when we get to Canon 74. And so this is allowing a certain amount of flexibility for the commission, again, with the approval of the ecclesiastical authority, which normally would be the bishop or the standing committee if the episcopacy is vacant. And that's, there's nobody else that can do that. So that's a good thing for that commission to do. Part 6 is a new canon. This has been proposed by the Anti-Racism Commission, which have been looking for to have their actual mission be contained in the diocesan canons. They've had extra canonical up to this point. And so they requested that we have as with other diocesan bodies that are set forth in the canons, that we have a canon to add that. And so that would be a proposed new canon 40. If you scroll down, you can see it's this normal kind of things for diocesan bodies, where it says that there is one, what the constitution of it is, and that's in section 1 of the canon 40. The responsibilities, which are set forth in section 2, section 3, how they should report, and section 4, what to do about reappointments and vacancies. And it's a fairly standard kind of a structure for diocesan bodies, and we recommend this adoption as well. Part 7. Again, this is Canon 74 relating to minimum compensation for clergy. And the two proposals here are to allow the commission to make an agreement to, well, the first part is to take a lesser amount than the required compensation for a given period of time. But this is a very special kind of extraordinary thing. And again, it has to be approved in writing by the Standing Commission on Clerical Compensation. And the second section in 1F, which is down at the bottom of that section, is for clergy that already have existing insurance, that they can make an agreement so that they don't, if they can rely on their existing insurance rather than having the parish or mission pay for it. And again, this requires the approval of the Standing Commission on Clerical Compensation. And so those are the proposals there. And that really wraps up the report of the Committee on Constitution and Canons. It is, again, we have two of our members that are running for election, and currently they're unopposed, but you never know. And so we would try to go forward. Again, as a reminder for anybody that makes a proposal, including Pat Hawkins for Canon 36, get it to the committee before December 1st. The earlier the better, so that we can coordinate and have a little feedback with the bodies involved, which had quite a bit of feedback with Anti-Racism Committee to make sure that everybody was happy with the language. And so we look forward to working with everybody that wants to deal with the canons of the Constitution of the diocese. And I think, well, just looking forward, most of these proposed resolutions that implement the changes, which are recommended by the Standing Committee on Constitution and Canons, will appear in what they call a consent calendar, which we've had for about 3 years or so in the rules for the Diocesan Convention. Rather than having a presentation of John Mitchell standing up and proposing each one of these one after the other for these various changes, these will all be put into a consent calendar, and unless somebody removes them from the consent calendar, and you can look at the rules of order for that, then they will be voted on by a batch, and we won't have to spend a lot of time at the convention talking about things which are not really controversial. Again, the rules of order, they're also posted on the diocesan website for documents for this convention. They are, if you recall, the last two conventions, we've had a set of rules of order, and we've had special rules of order for the virtual convention. Those have now all been combined into one set of rules of order. So you may want to review those to see where the things that apply to virtual conventions will apply. And with that, unless there's anything further question on Constitution canons, we can move forward to resolutions, document 4. Committee on Resolutions is a committee which is appointed by the bishop and given the task of receiving proposed resolutions other than ones that come out of other diocesan bodies that are by canon go directly to the convention. And these can be coming from anybody in the diocese. The committee sort of puts them into a standard format and sort of broadcasts them at pre-convention meetings like this. We also have a hearing on resolutions, which this year will be on February 26th, where the proposers and anybody else can show up, and it's going to be a Zoom meeting, and make any recommendations for changes or clarifications, and the proposers are allowed to do that. So also following that meeting, there will be a vote by the committee members to either recommend adoption or recommend against adoption, or to make no position. And again, if they recommend adoption, those will then go into the consent calendar for consideration en masse by the convention. And again, the timetable for the committee is proposed resolutions should be received by the committee by January 15th, and they will go into the preliminary report. Anything that is proposed after that date would have to have a 2/3 vote of convention for consideration. If we have it in time, we can include those late resolutions in the final report. We can't make any recommendation about those because we don't know if the convention will choose to hear them or not. So this year, we received, I think, 5 proposed resolutions. They were all timely. Resolution 2022-1 at the bottom of page 1. is to establish a creation care committee in the Diocese of New Jersey. And again, with the mandate of acting on Episcopal Church resolutions of the General Convention, dealing with climate issues, and that the proposers feel that the Environmental Commission has become rather inactive and needs to be revitalized. And so they want to have a creation care committee and changing the name, and with a special focus on the present climate emergency. And since the Environmental Commission is not a canonical body, there's no canon that talks about that. So this is something that can be done by resolution, and that's what the proposal is. And there's an explanation on the following pages with a whole slew of references to on the top of page 3 for the prior resolutions of the General Convention that that facilitate the kind of actions that need to be taken. And they're asking the diocese to implement through this committee. Resolution 2022-2 on the bottom of page 3 is a one of the things. Okay, this deals with the General Convention. The rules of the General Convention provide that dioceses can propose resolutions, which are the kind of legislative acts that get passed on or not passed by the General Convention. And this is asking the Diocese of New Jersey to propose this resolution to the General Convention, which is meeting this July. And it is to the effect of to include Barbara Clementine Harris, the former bishop from Massachusetts, as to be commemorated on the Lesser Feast and Fast calendar. And so so you can see the resolve of the 238th Annual Convention of the Diocese of New Jersey submit the following resolution to the 80th General Convention. And so then if this is passed, then as Secretary of Convention, will be then filing this with the General Convention office as being proposed by the Diocese of New Jersey. And as is typical for the format of General Convention resolutions, we have a resolution saying what should be done. And then it has a further resolved paragraph to have the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music, which is a standing body of the Episcopal Church, to prepare an appropriate proper for the day. And it also comes with an explanation that will be submitted to the General Convention for its consideration. I should point out that there is already a similar proposal for commemorating Bishop Harris that has already been filed with the General Convention by, I believe, an individual deputy. But this would help for getting that some traction when it comes to be considered this July at the General Convention. And that has been proposed by all of the members of the deputation for the Diocese of New Jersey to the General Convention. Resolution 2022-3. See if there's something in the comments. There's a question in the comments, I'm sorry, as to will consideration be given this year to propose resolutions for consideration due to the recent pandemic restrictions by the state of emergency and the recent state of emergency due to the snowstorm that occurred in New Jersey the weekend of January that may have shut down churches in our state and delayed meeting that would have occurred by the calendar stated in the section. Again, if there's somebody who had a resolution to prepare and present to the diocesan convention and they were unable to meet the January 15th deadline, they can submit that to the committee chair and or to me as the secretary of the committee, and along with an explanation as to why it was not able to be timely submitted. And it goes again to the convention to decide whether it will be submitted. Most cases, the convention will decide to consider something once they have an explanation as to why it was not timely submitted. Back to 2022-3, financial support for deacons. This is requiring congregations that have deacons assigned to serve them to pay at least $25 a month to them so that they can make and also make a contribution to the church pension fund for the benefit of the deacon. Otherwise, deacons, at least the ones that are prior to retirement age, would not be able to apply for any kind of a pension benefit from the church pension companies. And so the explanations lays all of those reasons out. I know that many parishes do budget for giving some kind of stipend for their deacons. Many deacons turn it down. But again, this is something which is a benefit for those of us who are serving the church as deacons, and many of us rely on our deacons, and so we should treat them well. Resolution 2022-4 is a topic that you may have seen before, and you will have. Thomas Meehan and his wife had a daughter who was killed in the World Trade Center destruction. And so this is a resolution to continue the commemoration of those people lost in that attack, and pray for those who have perished and for their survivors. And it also asks for forwarding a copy of the resolution, if passed, to the Executive Council of the Episcopal Church. And the explanation is given there, and it also believe that will be the next one. The next one is
I think this one, 2022-4, is for survivors of the coronavirus pandemic.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong page. 22-4 is also for Mr. and Mrs. Meehan, and they're concerned about people who have been lost to the pandemic of coronavirus. And so this is to pray for those people, and naming the anniversary date of November 17th, which apparently was when the first case was discovered in China. And again, requests a forwarding of this to the Episcopal Church. 2022-5 relates to the World Trade Center. And again, it is asking the convention to remember also the 2020 resolution 2004-1, which was originally the first one that came before this convention, concerned the World Trade Center victims. And so it lays forth a commemoration sequence that parishes can use for that commemoration on September 11th of this year. Are there any questions on any of the resolutions? Again, any comments that anybody has, you can submit for the hearing that's going to take place later this month. So that if there's anything that's in the text of the resolutions that would need to be clarified, or you think is inappropriate, the proposers have a chance to amend those appropriately. And they don't have to, but they have an opportunity to do so, which would help ensure their passage by the convention.
Paul, I do see that Father Alan Leonard has his hand up. Father Alan, could you go ahead and unmute yourself? Were you able to unmute, Father Allen? Oh, there you go. You got it.
There we go. Thank you very much. That was complicated. Yes, I was wondering on the resolution for deacon support. What impact does that have? Would that mean deacons could receive clergy minimum pension when they retired, or is that not high enough a donation to that? And I'm sort of wondering what the long-term financial impacts are for the church pension fund with that resolution.
I can't answer for the church pension fund, but there are certain benefits which are available other than the standard pension amounts of payment. If you look at the second paragraph of the statement in support, which is at the bottom of page 5 or towards the bottom of page 5, it says that provides resources for clergy and lay employees of churches, particularly retirement benefits, but they also have Credo, which is available to them, and also provides savings plans and health benefits and educational services, which you have to be part of the fund in order to get the benefit of. Again, if you're getting, $25 a month, it's not going to provide a very large pension, but it gives you access to these other programs, which I believe is what the proposers thought were particularly useful for deacons. And so, again, they talk about other dioceses having passed similar resolutions, and it gives a reference at the end, which should be if you can download the document, it should be a clickable link for the Associated for Episcopal Deacons, which explains these things.
Okay, I will check out the link. I was just wondering, because minimum pension, there is a church minimum pension which you get regardless of what your compensation was. And I wouldn't know if that triggered it, then you would actually get way more compensation in retirement than you did receive at your $25 a month because of the level of the minimum pension that church pension fund gives. But I will go research that. And when is the date for the committees to talk to these again?
It is February 26th, which is a week, I think, from Saturday.
Very good. Thank you.
And again, the link for that Zoom meeting is at the beginning of the report.
And I see Annette has her hand up. Annette? Are you able to unmute?
She did ask me to unmute her, and I have invited her to unmute. I can't.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was not allowed to be unmuted before. I just wanted to go back to the change we made to the Constitution with regard to the special meeting that needed to be held when there is a bishop search. I think the change simply said that there needed to be a special meeting, but my recollection is that every convocation approached the selection of nominees for the bishop search committee differently. Some had more, formal processes. Some, the nominees themselves were on the call. Others, there was no one present. So I think that we perhaps need a little bit more than a special meeting will be held, because if not, then our processes to elect nominees across the diocese are not consistent. So I would just suggest that if it is only the delegates to convocations that are the voting members, then we say that. If it's any clergy can attend that meeting, then we say that. But at every convocation meeting, this special meeting was implemented differently. And I think we need some consistency across the diocese.
As my understanding is that the only difference from regular convocation meetings were that I think, well, first of all, that resident clergy were allowed to participate this last time, and if this change is adopted for the canons, they would not be participating unless they are pursuing an active ministry within the convocation. As far as the individual congregational meetings are concerned,
Convocation meeting, not congregational, convocation.
Okay. The convocation ones, then again, this is something which is largely in the control of the deans of the convocations, but there is some guidance that in this proposal would allow the diocese to have some amounts of support for this in terms of making a nomination page available on the diocesan website, et cetera. And that's something that currently doesn't exist in the canons now. So it would help give that amount of uniformity. But beyond that, it's hard to different convocations have different ways of doing business.
So perhaps the update would be that the convocation deans meet to decide what the process will be for this special meeting.
Generally, they've been doing that. There is a requirement in the canon for dealing with convocations that the convocation deans meet regularly with the bishop. And I believe that leading up to these special meetings, there was a meeting of the deans in which they discussed these kinds of procedures. If you
But you-
feel that there should be additional instructions in the canons for how these meetings should be carried on, then feel free to make a proposal to the Standing Committee on Constitution and Canons, and they can consider that. Again, most of the input that we got for these changes, which resulted from the experience of the deans of the convocations, if the regular congregational members who were part of those convocations have additional comments that they want to make, we're happy to receive them, and we can consider them next year. As it is, we don't go around electing bishops every year, so it's looking to the future.
So I'm sorry, who was the source of that amendment so that I can kind of have a conversation with them about that?
I believe that we mostly got information from, I'm trying to, Greg Bazilla and somebody from one of the Southern convocations. I don't remember who it was.
Okay.
Steve, can you scroll back to that?
It's a previous document.
Oh, it's a
Oh, is
previous
it?
document.
Okay.
I still have it open.
Right. It said a special meeting will be held, but I can tell you just from obviously not every convocation did it differently.
Do we know which
It
resolution?
was I think it was the
Part
part
two, I think.
part two. Yes. Mm-hmm.
No,
Was it part? No, further up.
yeah, part two,
Yeah.
pages 2 and 3.
So who was it that proposed? Is that down further?
Yeah. The probably is a
At the
special
bottom of
meeting.
3.
Mhm. You just pass it, right?
Yeah, right there. Section 4B. It runs from one page to the next.
Right.
Yeah, it's up there. So that's the proposed change for the convocational meetings.
So, as you said, I can't make any changes this year, but as I mentioned previously, and not to prolong my comment, it's that these guidelines were not followed uniformly across the convocations. I still submit to that. So I will look at this more carefully and see what I can, perhaps include so that we have that uniformity. Thank you.
And if you want to communicate with the committee, you can send them to me by email. And my email is all over the diocesan website. But yes. And I see there's a question about the consent calendar. The consent calendar will have basically any proposed resolution to implement things from the Standing Committee on Constitution and Canons that's approved by the committee and recommended for passage. Any of the proposed resolutions that go through the Committee on Resolutions that the committee recommends for passage. I understand that there will be 1 or 2 resolutions from the Standing Commission on Clerical Compensation, and any other resolutions that are going to come forward for being voted on by the convention will be on the consent calendar, again with the proviso, and it's set forth in the rules of order for the consent calendar, that I think something like 3 members of convention can request that something be removed from the consent calendar and be deliberated on and voted upon separately. So if that's the case, then that will be taken off the consent calendar. The rest of the consent calendar would be then voted on and approved or not. And then any resolutions that are that have been taken off the calendar will be addressed by the chair of whatever the appropriate committee is and voted on separately that afternoon. Any further questions? That I can see that Father Bazilla noted in the chat that as a dean, he would be happy to speak with anybody about convocational meetings. So in that the case, I will turn the meeting back over to Phyllis.
And I'll just, again, just ask one more time if there are any other questions, anything that we haven't answered, haven't dealt with. So I see Lillian Armstrong just posted in the chat, going back to the canon for the ordinary discussion, is there something sensitive about that position to the extent that the new bishop would most likely want to appoint their own choice? I don't understand why it's considered expendable for a year or so. And the answer to your question, Lillian, would be yes. The canon to the ordinary position is appointed by the bishop. And so, if Bishop Stokes were to appoint someone to that position now, it would probably be very difficult because most people know that with an incoming bishop, that position may very well change as well. It's something that actually is true for anyone on diocesan staff, but most for, traditionally most so for the canon to the ordinary, because that is the person who works very, a person who works very, very closely with the bishop, like the bishop's right-hand person. And so, yes, there is a really good chance that if someone was appointed by Bishop Stokes, then that person may only have a tenure till next year and a half or so. And the incoming bishop may very well want to appoint someone else. So that is a part of everything that's going into trying to work with all of the fluidity, I guess is what I want to say, of the situation that we find ourselves in now. So you're welcome. Anything else? Any other questions? Well, again, I just want to sincerely thank all of you for taking the time out of this afternoon to really engage with us in the things that we've talked about. All of it is extremely helpful to us as we move forward and plan to do the best that we can to get the best information in front of convention for us to be able to move efficiently through it. So again, thank you very much for your time, for your engagement, and your dedication and passion to the mission and ministry of the Diocese of New Jersey. It is all very deeply appreciated, and we look forward to seeing you at convention, if not sooner. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and God bless you. Thank you.